In the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, riot police have been dispersing protesters with tear gas and water cannons. That's after rioters broke through a barricade near the country's parliament while attempting to storm the building in a protest against a new foreign agent law. Road traffic has been blocked in the city, with mass arrests also reported. Some of the protesters were seen throwing Molotov cocktails and stones at police, leaving several officers injured. Ambulances arrived to help treat any casualties. And earlier on Tuesday, the proposed law sparked clashes between Georgian lawmakers inside parliament. That's despite the initiative, which the U.S. Embassy in Tbilisi has described as Kremlin-inspired, being approved by a majority of MPs. RT correspondent Marina Kozareva has more details.
This foreign agent law basically means that any organizations receiving foreign funding have to register as foreign agents, basically that they are working in the interest of the country that is giving them those funds. We've seen in the past how such situations have been used by other countries that want to influence the politics within a particular nation, and this is what they use. They fund opposition movements either through various NGOs, or they try and form public perception by funding, for example, even private news organizations. So the absolute majority, however, of MPs voted in favor of this bill. This just passed the first reading, so there will be more. However, the president of the country already spoke out and said that she's absolutely against this bill, and she said she fears for the country's future with the West if this passes.
This law can be cancelled in any way you want. From day one, I said I would veto this law, and I will veto it. I do not care about its article-by-article discussion, its similarity to the old American law, which we well know serves a completely different purpose. Those who support this law and those who voted for this law are violating Constitution. You're taking us all away from Europe.
And then she went on to add that this law supposedly didn't come out of nowhere, that it was dictated to them by Moscow. Russia, of course, has a similar law, so perhaps this is what she was alluding to. But also she said that she stands next to the protesters, she's with them, she supports them, and she said that they represent the free Georgia today, a Georgia that sees itself, that sees its future within Europe. This is why we can see some of the crowds there waving the EU flag and chanting slogans of support there. Now, even though she said that she could repeal the law if it crosses her desk, the ruling Dream Party are said to have the parliamentary majority, so it's unclear whether she will be actually able to veto that. Now, Georgia has already been warned by the West regarding this legislation. For example, on Tuesday, the EU released a statement saying that this draft legislation is incompatible with EU values and standards, and it could have serious repercussions on the country and the relationship in the future. And, of course, the United States, back in February, they also issued a statement. The U.S. Department spokesperson said anyone voting for this legislation could also jeopardize Georgia's relationship with Europe and the United States. And also, let's have a look at the statements released by the U.S. Embassy in Georgia, basically echoing the same sentiment.
Today is a dark day for Georgia's democracy. Parliament's advancing of these Kremlin-inspired laws is incompatible with the people of Georgia's clear desire for European integration and its democratic development. Pursuing these laws will damage Georgia's relations with its strategic partners and undermine the important work of so many Georgian organizations working to help their fellow citizens. The process and the draft laws raise real questions about the ruling party's commitment to Euro-Atlantic integration.
So we have the standoff, it seems, which resulted already in clashes, as we've seen, sort of eerily echoing what we saw in Kiev back in 2014 after they didn't want to sign the EU association agreement. So we'll be monitoring the situation and see how it ends, how it unfolds, if this is it or if it will continue.
We spoke to American civil rights attorney Robert Patillo, who said third parties may have had a hand in the events in Georgia's capital.
We're looking at a people's uprising, a standing up against the current regime which is in place, but also the interference of the Western powers when it comes to the popular opinion of the citizens there. We've known for years that the Western powers have sought to influence any country that's within Russia's sphere of influence, whether that be Chechnya, whether that be Ukraine, whether that be the People's Republic of Georgia. We've gotten nothing but mixed messages. On the one hand, saying that yes, we support the protesters, but on the other hand, having very heavy-handed police operations and a near paramilitary response to such. If you support the protesters, then sit down with their leadership, bring them into the to government. We had create peace accords that will bring an end to the protests. But instead, we're seeing the continued militarization of these protests and a lack of understanding or a lack of ability to negotiate a settlement.
The Kremlin spokesman has dismissed the latest reports from Western media that laid the blame for the Nord Stream pipeline attack on a pro-Ukrainian group as a coordinated distraction, which draws attention away from previous theories of Western involvement in last year's bombing of the Russian pipelines. These claims also contradict the recent investigations by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, who alleged that the U.S. government was involved in the attack.
Officials who have reviewed the intelligence said they believe the saboteurs were most likely Ukrainian or Russian nationals or some combination of the two. U.S. officials said no American or British nationals were involved.
The boat that was allegedly used for the secret operation is said to be a yacht rented from a company based in Poland, apparently owned by 2 Ukrainians.
In response to these latest claims, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman also says the reports are an attempt to distract from the alleged Western role in the pipeline attacks.
The Western media is bombarded by the news that the investigation into the terrorist attacks against Nord Stream has a version that this is A, not Russia, B, Ukrainian groups. I wonder who allows such leaks, filling the information space with them. The answer? Those who do not want to conduct an investigation in the legal field and are going to divert the attention of the audience from the facts in every possible way. Instead of leaks, the Western regimes involved in the incident should respond to official requests from the Russian side and, at the very least, take into account the materials of the Hersh investigation instead of replacing them with anonymous throw-ins.
Well, Washington is trying to now explain the situation in response to all the backlash they've received since Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh revealed in his documentation and his reporting that he feels strongly that it is Washington and the White House who is responsible for the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Now, this new report published by the New York Times says that it was not the White House and rather puts the blame, shifting it away from the West onto what it says were some Ukrainians and some Russians. And they also seem to not show that Kiev was directly involved.
Any suggestion of Ukrainian involvement, whether direct or indirect, could upset the delicate relationship between Ukraine and Germany, souring support among a German public that has swallowed high energy prices in the name of solidarity.
Now, Berlin has taken note of this report that seems to show the involvement of pro-Ukrainian groups in the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And it certainly raises questions, as Germany was the biggest country to suffer as a result of the pipeline's destruction. It raises questions about Germany, the biggest economy in the European Union, and its continued relationship with the government in Kiev. Now, it's important to note that the White House has been silent in response to the revelations from Seymour Hersh regarding the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and its destruction. Many look on and say this is probably because they don't want to obviously state what is already seems to be indicated and what many observers are taking note of.
If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Now, Danish officials are going to allow inspection of the site where the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was destroyed, according to a recent leak that was received. There has been silence from the White House, and now it appears this new report from the New York Times that cites anonymous intelligence officials seems to be basically letting the White House off the hook and letting Western powers off the hook and providing Kiev with an alibi. That seems to be what's going on. Now, at this point, we've got Seymour Hersh saying that he doesn't think that the White House or the U.S. government will ever admit what they did regarding Nord Stream 2. Here's what he said.
The last thing the White House, look, I'm telling you, they're never going to say, I surrender. They're just never going to do it.
Now, Seymour Hersh has also indicated that he has further information to reveal regarding the destruction of Nord Stream 2, and this new report is being highly awaited. And there's a lot of anticipation to see what further details Seymour Hersh has to reveal in light of today's piece from the New York Times.
Legal and media analyst Lionel says the mainstream media has resorted to repeating instead of reporting while failing to carry any actual facts.
I have read this story 10 times. I keep thinking they must have cut off a portion of this. This doesn't say anything. 3 authors, 3 from the once vaunted, heralded New York Times, mainstream media today. I don't know if it's American or if it's Western, but mainstream media are repeaters, not reporters. They repeat. They're proxies. They're agents. They're correspondents. They're propagandists. Who had the motive? If you ask somebody, Nord Stream 2, a pipeline between Russia and Germany, who would have the motive? Who would benefit from this? Cui bono? Cui prodest? Who benefits? Ask yourself. And the first thing they said was, Russia. How does that work? Well, because they're so evil. What? Yes. Because this evil knows no sanity is what this evil apparently doesn't know. So now you have this, which all of a sudden, now, let me also tell you, I don't want to make it even more complicated or seemingly complicated because it's so obvious. When you have 2 leading officials saying, if you do this, that Nord Stream is through. And what happens? Now, come on. Come on. Why are we even discussing this? How is it 2 people, what do they happen to say that? Really? That was just an expression. When I said something bad would happen, I didn't think it really would happen. And the third question, which nobody is maybe explaining to me, and I'm just a layman. I don't know anything about demolitions. I've never destroyed anything underwater or above water, for that matter. Doesn't it take a lot of effort? Aren't these pipelines really encased in concrete or steel? Or when you leave something that important unattended in the ocean, how is it that these people happen to go out in a rowboat, dive down, I don't know how many meters, use whatever equipment is available? This story is so preposterous from the beginning. And meanwhile, nobody has ever said to Seymour Hersh, you're incorrect because of such and such, or your facts, or that's preposterous. It's the very fact that we're discussing this is a testament to the power of whoever is controlling the narrative, because this is obvious.
German politicians Ralph T. Niemeyer and Martin Dolzer say it's easier to figure out who benefits from the sudden switch of suspects.
If we look at the normal investigative journalists in Germany, it's not the ARD Hauptstadtstudio and the newspaper Die Zeit. They are both linked to transatlantic think tanks very closely and to the government, who made this attacks on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 would endanger the security of Germany. And now there is leaks like that. There must be some reason. So I think the version which had been brought into light by Seymour Hersh seems to me a bit more likely to be the truth than what happens now.
I call it a weapon of mass distraction. So they want to blame everybody else, but not themselves. Of course, they would never admit that But if time goes by, at the end, people will understand that those who really had an interest were the United States of America. It's also because Mr. Biden is facing a re-election campaign that is going to start at the end of this year or beginning of next year. So he has to win some support among his own people.
Polish state-owned oil company is planning to sue Russia over the halt of supplies via a pipeline that transports oil to Eastern Europe. Despite Warsaw being an active proponent of anti-Russian energy sanctions, it still blames Moscow for the disruption.
After President Joe Biden's visit, the Russians stopped pumping oil to Poland. We will now take legal action and assert claims.
Let me get this straight. Poland is upset that Russia won't take Poland's money anymore. Poland has been going out of its way to act as Ukraine's teacher's pet within the EU, going around publicly bullying its fellow European allies for doing business with Russia. Just a few days ago, the Polish defense minister said on state TV, quote, "There is no doubt it was Germany's policy that helped Putin get money, which he used to strengthen his army. Nord Stream is an example. Although we were called Russophobic, we warned against it." We're talking billions that Poland has sent to Russia for energy, as the German ambassador to the country has pointed out. Now, Poland even promised to end all Russian oil imports by the end of last year. So you'd think that they would welcome this development. But now the same CEO of Poland's state energy firm Orlen is complaining that the evil Russian oil has stopped flowing into Poland, which was the largest importer of Russian oil to the whole of EU in January, consisting of about 10% of its supply. And when confronted with that fact, the same CEO's defense was basically that he just didn't know how to shut off the tap.
There were two contracts. One contract expired in January. The other expires in 2024. It is difficult to break a contract without sanctions. We would expose ourselves to large fines, and that money would go to Putin anyway. We would pay for the oil that we didn't even receive.
So he's saying that he'd really like to shut off that Russian oil to Poland, but that he couldn't do that without getting fined for breaking a business contract with Russia. So it'd be better to just keep paying for the Russian oil than to have to pay a massive fine for stopping it. Well, buddy, looks like your problems are all solved, because it sounds like Moscow has basically now stopped, and he won't have to pay the fine. So what's the problem? Unless, of course, he really didn't want to break Poland's long-term relationship with Russian oil and was just telling everyone that they were only dating casually, until something or someone better came along and offered some other supply. Speaking of dating on the down low, German economy minister Robert Habeck also said this week that Berlin doesn't have a formal relationship with Russian gas after someone mysteriously blew it up along with the Nord Stream pipelines.
We are not dependent on Russian gas supplies at the moment. It may be that through the LNG terminals of neighboring countries through which gas quantities come, Russian molecules are in the gas mix. That can neither be controlled nor excluded. But German companies do not buy LNG gas from Russian companies or Russia.
He makes it sound like Russian gas is imposing itself on Germany like some kind of a crazy ex. Like, well, we tried to get it off our lawn, but it just wouldn't leave us alone. So they're acting like it's not really their fault if they're still playing some kind of light footsie under the table with Russian fuel. The American CEO of Chevron, Mike Wirth, recently pointed out that indeed Europe is still getting Russian fuel, that it's just taking the long way around from Russia, going through unsanctioned countries. And obviously, that's going to mean that it's more expensive and also introduces more potential risks in a much larger supply chain, which conveniently makes U.S. natural gas a lot more attractive. So it's hardly a surprise, for example, that Shell Oil's CEO is now saying that the stability of the U.S. energy market makes it more attractive for the company's investments than, for example, the UK or Europe. And European customers and industry are absolutely the ones bearing the brunt of all these added costs to buy energy and to reroute it through half the world. Now, Europe has been saying that it wants to ramp up its military industrial production, but here in France, they're even struggling to keep making baguettes due to the energy costs. So good luck with that, guys. Meanwhile, the bloc's fearless leaders keep saying that they're strong and independent and don't need Russian fuel, even as they keep importing it on the sly. That is until, as we've just seen with Poland, Russian fuel dumps them.